We need to stop the madness with which we are treating nature.
In the context of Pakistan, climate change is a water. Either we are facing the floods or we are facing the drought.
The world, the humanity has been sent a memo by nature, and that memo has come via Pakistan.
The floods have caused tremendous suffering, unspeakable suffering.
The UK would be underwater, entire UK. No city, no town without water.
I have never seen climate carnage on this scale. I have simply no words to describe what I've seen.
Pakistan's romance with the yearly monsoon season is weaved into poetry, culture, and even food. A 2022 so-called monsoon on steroids brought more water in a few days than the 30-year average. An unprecedented disaster on an unimaginable scale.
It is tough to wrap your head around how a monsoon can actually do this to an entire country.
As far as the eye can see, there is an inland sea. Hospitals, schools, medical centers, power grids, everything has been taken over by the Great Deluge. We've been hearing stories from fathers who couldn't bury their children because there was no dry land. We've heard stories about children who were drinking from the same water where their dead cattle was floating.
बच्चे हमारे पानी में से आ रहे हैं और पानी में से डूबने का खतरा है, मरने का खतरा है। घर गांव हमारे मुकम्मल तौर तबाह हो चुके हैं।
कुछ न बचो बा, काश है ना असांजी बची जगह में वही हली अन्न लुढ़ी वियो असांजो छा बच्चा खा कहिड़ी शइ खाई वेठा आहियूं पधर ते।
2-3 लाशें निकालें, एक औरत है, इसकी भतीजी है, उसकी 2 घंटे वो सीरियस थी, रोड पे पड़ी थी, उसको कोई उठाने वाला नहीं था, एम्बुलेंस नहीं थी, कुछ नहीं थी। क्यों हम इतने गिरे हुए थोड़ी हैं, हमारे सिंधी हैं, वो भी हमारा सिंधी भाई है, उसको कहो आके हमारी हालत देखे।
असांजे तंबू कोनन के न कुझे कोन असांखे मिलियो आहे काठियूं बि कोनन के मानी के छाते पछाई न खाधो आहे न पीतो आहे कुझे कोन न मजूरी आहे हींअर
टोबू असांखे कढिया असांजे ॿाहिरि गया सभु कपिड़ा खणी सभु लुड़ी वियासीं टोबू खां कढिया आहिनि न मानी न को बि असांजे ॿाहिरि 3-4 ॾींहं थिया आहिनि बुखे वेठा आहिनि असां कुझु कपिड़ा गंदी सभु असांजे सभु लुड़ी विया आहिनि
आके हमारी देखे इधर हालत है। पहले तो हाथ जोड़ के कहते वोट दे दो, वोट दे दे, हम आपको सब कुछ देंगे। अभी एक कुछ भी नहीं दे रहे, 1 रुपया भी नहीं दे रहे गरीब को।
Lots of questions raised about what did you do in the last decade since the 2010 floods? What mitigation efforts had you taken, and why has your response been slow?
The response was slow. We've never seen 33 million people affected. We've never seen a non-riverine flood. We've never seen a cloud bursts uninterrupted for days on end, for months on end, carry on and on and on, and then come back again. So, well, I don't think the province of Sindh ever thought, nor did Balochistan think that they would see 5 times the amount of rain in what is known as a monsoon. Sindh went through 700%. Is that something you can even, of rain, that you can even wrap your head around? Nobody has even planned for such calamities where you are saving water during a rain season for the drought that we normally experience. Well, those small dams, even the big dams became a problem. As you can see, there was no known method of reaching people that needed to be saved. You know, search and rescue is usually done by helicopters in our river floods and all that. Here, the helis couldn't take off because the skies were erupting. And so we just waited and we saw and heard of people losing lives. It's extremely traumatic.
So what is the scale of the disaster? We asked the general in charge of coordinating the flood response and one of the leading experts on South Asia's water.
Clearly, science was leading towards the two key indicators. One was about there will be heat waves, will be with the particularly higher heat waves in part of the South Asia region. And second was about that with heavy precipitation. Basically, the riverine flood, we started coming it on the top of that one, due to La Nina event. So on one hand side, we are affected from the riverine flood. We started from the upper part. And on the second hand part is southern part of Punjab and in Balochistan, we have been severely hit by the hill torrents. And that flash flooding combined with that one, the riverine flood, that has a huge catastrophe.
We have almost whole of the Sindh province. A major portion of Balochistan has had huge rains, and then certain portions of Punjab and KPK. At Padidan, we had 1752 millimeters of rain. This kind of rain can sink any place. We have 26 districts which have received rain in excess of 500 millimeters. And this is not spread over a month or 2 months, in just a matter of days. And unfortunately, due to climate change, what has happened is that this rain has come in those areas which are not accustomed to receiving rain. They receive rain in a normal monsoon, 50 millimeters, 70 millimeters in the entire season. This time, in a matter of just a week or 2 weeks, they received 1,000, 1,500, 1,200 millimeters of rain. That has basically overpowered our efforts.
There is many areas of Balochistan were disconnected for at least 2 weeks there, in part of southern Punjab affected, and also in part of KP. So I think that Pakistan becomes a unique example where you could see that when the climate change is a real phenomenon there, although Pakistan is not contributing in terms of the global greenhouse gas emission, but that in terms of climate vulnerability, that's become the number 8 country.
Major ponds and puddles in many areas are standing. From Hamal Lake to the Indus, it seems as if it is a lake. The size of the water is so huge that if this water was there in Portugal, whole Portugal would be underwater. Whole Ecuador would be underwater. The Colorado State of the US would be underwater. The UK would be underwater. Entire UK. No city, no town without water. Everybody would be drowning in this water with 6 to 8 feet of water standing. So this is the kind of scale that we have.
An estimated 16 million children are affected. They haven't just lost homes and schools, but they also face disease and malnutrition. As the water became stagnant in the southern Sindh province, there are already breakouts of cholera, diarrhea, and other waterborne illnesses. They have no choice but to wade floodwater, and tens of thousands are facing painful skin conditions. The water is also breeding ground for mosquitoes, so malaria and dengue fever are also claiming lives. The dilemma, they're surrounded by it, but there isn't any clean water to drink.
So it's been a horrendous experience, and the worst thing is that this was for the poorest Pakistanis. So the poorest people in Pakistan have been rendered even more poor. Pakistan will probably see life expectancy go down. Pakistan will probably see infant mortality go up. Pakistan will probably see women dying at childbirth, that number go up. So a lot of really, in terms of human development index, in terms of human misery, I think it would be much worse for Pakistan.
What does it mean for Pakistani economy?
There's significant loss, damage to crops. In Sindh, there's the province, we've lost 30% of Pakistan's cotton, 20 to 30% of our rice crop, which is 20% of the sugarcane crop there, maybe 30% of our onion crop, 246 bridges which have broken, 6,500 kilometers of metal road have been, broken, and we have to repair them. So considerable amount of damage. And then obviously there will be an effect on the economy. People will not be employed for some months, and perhaps the future grain harvest, that would be affected.
The next step is what worries me is, the cameras have left, the waters have not yet subsided. How do we start, even if the waters subside? Where are we going to mobilize the vast resources in a cash-strapped economy to rebuild this country and get people's jobs and livelihoods back on their feet and not be further debt burdened?
Villages in Pakistan, rural areas, people save grains, that they grow for the whole year. Now those grains have washed away. So there's some shortage of wheat, for instance, and stuff like that. So the loss is probably north of 18 billion, I'm pretty sure. I think the figure between 30 and 40 probably is more correct. The economic setback is going to be huge. We will still be stable. We will still, survive, but we will survive as a poorer country. And a lot of very poor people in Pakistan who are already living in a very desperate life will have a more desperate life.
Would people die of thirst? Would people die of hunger? Would there be no food in Pakistan? Would there be no water in Pakistan? Would there be even bigger floods in Pakistan? What are those main dangers that the people of Pakistan face?
First is the food insecurity due to less water productivity of the agriculture crops. Second is about the damages caused by the flood onto the people and then their survival. And third is about that the mass migration from the rural areas toward the major cities, and that will be affecting all kind of the problem in the society.
It isn't the first time floods have ravaged Pakistan. This woman was airlifted to safety in 2010 when rivers burst their banks and flooded major parts.
12 years later, we're seeing similar scenes of rescue and relief, but at a scale never seen before. In the 2010 floods, there was a lag between the water traveling from the north to the south, but this time around, the rains have been relentless, in addition to the riverine floods.
The Hindu Kush and Himalayas form the so-called third pole, where glacial ice provides water for one of the most populated parts of the world. Pakistan's 7,000 plus known glaciers make it home to more glacial ice than anywhere on Earth outside the polar regions. In 2021, we visited some of the 7 million people who are at risk from glacial floods. Out of the 3,000 or more glacial lakes in northern Pakistan, the United Nations says 33 are dangerous. Already more than 600 acres of arable land have been lost to rivers. A few kilometers downstream, this is what the river looked like with regular glacial melt. We met the only man helping people in the Swat River.
In these rapids for about 100 kilometers, this is the only rescue service. Most of the time, Hilal only finds bodies.
That was the normal water flow. When the gushing water came, it took out bridges, roads and homes, everything in its path. We visited this tourist site in Kalam, and now after the floods, only the tips of these tall structures are visible. The then Minister for Climate Change warned about what he called climate injustice, as Pakistan spends $14 billion a year on forced adaptation to its changing climate.
These glaciers don't just affect the 7 million people, they affect the 230 million people who live in Pakistan. This is a huge challenge for Pakistan. It's not of our own making. It's not because of Pakistan's emissions. It's because of what is happening around the world on climate change, and we are getting affected by this.
A year before these floods, we also went to southern Pakistan facing a drought. Same country, with a different impact of changing climate patterns. Ahead of the floods, there's also been persistent lack of rain, and 4 out of the 8 species of mangroves no longer exist in Pakistan. For tens of thousands of people on the southern coast, fresh water is not an option, and that's forced tens of thousands from their homes in the last decade.
Humanity has been sent a memo by nature, and that memo has come via Pakistan that, this is not going to, the global warming goals that we thought of, the timelines we thought of, are not going at the pace we thought they would. The climate modeling is off, everything is off. as the Secretary General, the UN Secretary General said, we waged a war against nature with burning up, with our addiction to fossil fuels. And now nature is waging a war on us. The global north has been spending more money on mitigation, which is reducing emissions. Well, that's just not been enough. You see exactly where we are. We are hurtling towards a climate Armageddon brought about by global warming and high emissions that are just not going down.
We have two large dams, Tarvela and Mangla. One of them, Mangla Dam, which is in Azad Kashmir, which gets monsoon rains every year, there was not enough rain. So that actually is only at 50% capacity, whereas it should be really at capacity right now. So while we have so much water right now, in winter time we might actually have a slight water shortage. And that's a really tragic thing.
Unless the water is drained out, unless people go back to their homes, unless there is rehabilitation, what will happen?
We are worried that if we do not get the wheat planted, we do not get the water out and get the wheat planted, if we do not have enough seed, these very people who survive from year to year will face a very tough time. Firstly, they've lost everything. They've lost their homes, they've lost their belongings, which had taken time to build. That loss these people have to bear. Dangers. First of all, disease. This is a major danger in this area. We need the international community's help to overcome the disease, malaria, diarrhea, and other such diseases, waterborne diseases. We need filtration plants to clean the water.
Pakistan might be facing prolonged rains, more floods, more droughts. So what is being done to deal with this on a long-term basis, not just providing relief and rehabilitation?
The thing is, this is a climate-induced calamity. And you are very right, the climate is undergoing a huge change. The world was telling us about 4 months back that we'll have a drought this year. The rains will be 30% less. And we had huge forest fires in April and May. Come June, huge water. So it's a complete change for which you can't really be prepared with the things that we have been living with. This thing requires that we change the way our drainage system works. We have to improve our drainage system so that the water can go out. If we don't do that, we won't be able to do anything. Additionally, we will also have to see how we grow our crops. In which season do we grow them? We'll have to work on that. Then we'll have to have disaster-resistant structures now.
As a country, we are working in silos. And let's take the example of water security, food security, energy security, and then how that's working within the climate change context. I think we need to adopt that one, the water, energy, food ecosystem nexus approach to overcome some of the silo approaches there, because the problems are quite complex. And to overcome the quite complex problem, we need to adopt the system approach, and system approach will provide up the out-of-the-box solution.
It essentially feels that you're exactly in the same place. Whether it's the water authority not talking to others, whether there is a complete disconnect between the threat matrix and actions being taken on the ground, there has to be some responsibility that has to be taken by the people in power.
We really are focused on the flood. But were people living in the ways of hill torrents? Yes. Were there, hutments and settlements in the way of hill torrents? Yes. But in previous floods, the idea was that, people should not be living very close to the river. This is very different. I mean, this is, you could be living anywhere. But yes, there have been planning issues in the last 10, 15 years.
More than 60 planes carrying aid have come in. There's the perception of corruption there as well. So what is happening with all of the aid that is coming in, and why is it not reaching people?
We are thankful to our friends in different nations who have come to our aid and help in this great calamity. But the thing is, if you send 100 planes would take 1,600 tons, 2,000 tons, 2,500 tons at the max. But our requirement is such, just to give you an idea, almost 33 million population is affected, out of which we have almost about 1 million to 1.5 million people still living in tents. In order to provide food for those people, you require almost 300 to 400 tons of food every day. So the aid that we have received is sufficient for, say, 5 days, 6 days. In the army, at different collection centers, we have 284 collection centers all over Pakistan. We have collected almost 8,500 tons of just food. I have pushed that from the north to the south because that is where it was required. So you can imagine 2,500 tons and 8,500 tons. We are grateful for that aid, but we require much more just to keep these people fed.
Thousands of people have volunteered. Hundreds of non-governmental organizations are providing relief, yet millions of people desperately need aid.
So I think there's a lot of sympathy for Pakistan. There's a lot of understanding, but the international community has its own priorities, has its own dynamic. I think there would be more words of sympathy than money coming in, but I think that there would be significant help as well.
How has the response been, and what are you asking of the international community?
So they came in, many people came in with a great deal of empathy. They left wringing their hands in despair at what they saw. So every single one of them, they were in shock, jaw-dropping shock at the ocean they saw underneath. And they said, well, you know, this is not what we thought it was. Anyway, having said that, they were as generous as they could be, but everyone has their own commitments, one of them being conflicts in the heart of Europe.
I don't think they're going to make good the 30-40 billion that I've lost. But I think that, you know, there should be some measure of help, whether it's the international agencies who give greater loans to Pakistan, whether it's whether it's, you know, other countries that, you know, underwrite some loans to Pakistan, take the risk, you know, and all that, you know, and give insurance to banks to give us loans, give us preferential trade treatment, stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff that the Western countries can do.
And we require international help, firstly, for the rehabilitation of the drainage system. We require international help for the rehabilitation of the health sector. And we require international help for rehabilitation of the agriculture sector. We need help in this regard so that we can keep the things moving forward. This will help our people to come back, because livelihood needs to be re-established. If it is not established, then we are in great danger.
Nature is striking back, and climate change is supercharging the destruction of our planet. And this is not just a question of solidarity or generosity, it is a question of justice.
If you're looking at it from a far distance where you have plenty of snow and water and green fields, what is the danger? Why should people care about Pakistan?
Because climate change and trauma sees no borders. It's my country one day, tomorrow it's another. It is a big test case for humanity. It is a wake-up call to all the countries who've forgotten about multilateralism, about the rules of that global game, and how humanity has to fight to just keep its feet on the ground before the planet burns up. Even if we go totally green and totally renewable tomorrow, somehow, we will still remain very tiny contributors. Because we are tiny contributors to the emissions pool, the global emissions pool, it won't make a difference. So global warming will continue, our glaciers will continue to melt. What's the way forward? The way forward is that the big polluters, the big emitters, have to make restitution to the global south, and I don't mean reparations, I mean restitution, which is compensation, in the financial mechanism of loss and damage, which should be put on the climate finance agenda. Well, that $100 billion fund has hardly been, parceled out. Barely $18 billion have come out of it. Most of it has gone to mitigation. Adaptation is literally the here and now of fighting to save our lives from the onrushing storm. And I'm confident that the world will listen. It can't be so unjust.
These waters might recede in a few weeks or months, but climate change is here to stay, and millions of Pakistanis at the risk of floods and drought are afraid that the world will once again forget about them until another monsoon on steroids hits them.